So it's been a pretty busy week for Tottenham Hotspur, which is something that you can't really say about the club for at least a month. The manager search has been a bit comical, but that has now come to an end as of 2 to 3 hours ago, time of recording, with Nuno Espirito Santo coming in. However, there's been other pieces of news that this video will focus on, and you can subscribe to the channel and get the video on Nuno Espirito Santo in the upcoming week or so. But this video will be focusing on Takehiro Tomiyasu, who has been heavily linked from Bologna in Serie A to join Tottenham Hotspur. So I took a deep dive to understand his numbers a little bit, understand him as a player, and what he could bring to the table for Spurs. Bologna actually just acquired Tomiyasu last season from a Belgian team. I don't know how to pronounce that name, so there it is. They acquired him to fill that right back slash center back role that they had open last season, or excuse me, the season prior. And Tomiyasu has adapted very well to Serie A. Now, as far as for Tomiyasu himself, he was acquired for 10 million euros, and Bologna are looking to potentially double that literally just 1 year after he joined them. That's because he was a very integral part to their team and their system of play. Their system of play consisted of a pretty traditional 4-2-3-1, which their manager, again, can't pronounce it, so here you are, instituted since he has been at Bologna. And the way that they play in possession is just with a flat back four, in which Tomiyasu is actually a right back. As Bologna keeps possession, he reverts into a right center back since the left winger or the left wing back typically pushes up. So right off the bat, if you look at Tomiyasu's numbers, you compare them to a center backs and you compare them to a full backs, but he doesn't really quite fit either, right? So there's a lot of nuance which necessitates just having to watch him play games and how he plays. And one thing that I noticed about him very, very early on in my research is that he is very adept at understanding where the problem and danger areas are developing before the play is actually developed. Here we see a pretty straightforward screen cap of Tomiyasu just understanding that the run is being made by the opposition, a Juventus player, and he starts his sprint very, very early in order to occupy that space and pressure the Juventus forward. He goes to show how quickly he is reading the situation. Here, again, you see that he is reading the situation, although the situation calls for him to adapt because his marker in the red circle is not really involved in the run of play. However, he reads that there is a flick on opportunity for the opposition, and seeing his defender step up out of position, he decides to go in there and cover that space. Once again, in the Italian league where defense is pretty much everything, it's really impressive that someone of Tomiyasu's age can go in there and fill this role for a Bologna team. Although they did end 12th, right? They had their own struggles. Tomiyasu himself has been very successful there. And you can see that through his numbers in defense. Overall, he's averaging around 61.5% duels won, which is right around the average for Tottenham defenders. Surprisingly enough, Davinson Sanchez is the one that has that wins the most amount of duels at 68%. Now, what is most surprising and what really caught my eye about Tomiyasu and the way that he plays is that as he is forced to play as a right center back in a system that likes to press high, he gets caught upfield fairly often. Now, what that means, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? What that means is that it's up to him to pressure the player that is providing the outlet for the opposition, right? Especially if they're trying to attack down the opposition left channel, of course, Tomiyasu's right channel. So Tomiyasu is tasked with blocking that channel and ensuring that any progress is harried in that area. And you really see this in two main stats. Number one, he averages the second most amount of counter pressing recoveries in Serie A at 4.41 per 90. A counter-pressing recovery means that the opposition has recouped possession, and in less than 5 seconds, the player recovers the ball. Again, he is second in Serie A for counter-pressing recoveries, and he is also third in overall recoveries and per 90 minutes at 10.1. He is regaining possession, and his team, Bologna, are able to retain possession for at least 5 seconds. So that is considered a sustained amount of possession. He does that 10 times in a 90-minute game. Of course, a lot of this is due to the system that Bologna plays, but at the same time, there is no system without the individual player. So the individual player's qualities fit into the system extremely well, at least on the defensive side. So let's take a look very briefly at what he can offer on the possession. Now, being that right center back and occupying a higher space than most center backs, he is tasked with building triangles with a midfielder and the flank midfielder as well. So in this case, Orsolini, because Tomiyasu has developed a great relationship with Orsolini, the right winger, right midfielder for Bologna. Here we see Tomiyasu quite far upfield in possession, building that triangle. And of course, you see on the left side, the run in order to maintain width by the fullback on the opposite side. One of the main ways that Bologna play is relying on Tomiyasu for balls forward. Now, here again, we see another triangle, and we see that Juventus players are being pulled out of position. As they are pulled out of position, one of the midfielders makes a run into that space. Tomiyasu, in this particular instance, decides to go towards the flank. However, it's very important to note that these runs are not one-offs. They are consistently being made when Tomiyasu is on the ball. And one of the reasons for that is because he averages 8.22 progressive passes per game, while also averaging 6.92 passes into the final third. That's much higher than most Spurs players, apart from Toby Alderweireld, most center backs in the Spurs team. What's probably most impressive about Tomiyasu's passing is just how consistent it is in moving forward. Typically, Tottenham defenders, their long progressive pass percentage tends to hang around 60 to 70%. Tomiyasu's is at 75%. And in a game of fine margins, in a game where one pass can create a goal-scoring opportunity, that's a very big bump. And not even Joachim Andersen is hitting that. That being said, Joachim Andersen is trying a lot more things with long balls. He does them more often, although perhaps not to as much of a successful way. And he also does get involved in the final third. However, one thing that I've noticed is that Tomiyasu's defensive numbers tend to indicate that he can be relied upon a bit more on 1v1s and just overall ball winning, as opposed to a Joachim Andersen, who admittedly seems to be better in the air. Here we see Tomiyasu doing something extremely similar. Again, the triangle is there, and he is taking the ball into space, owning that space, and being proactive with the ball itself. One of the midfielders from Bologna cuts inside and then makes an angled run into the space that is being opened up by the fullback, who is trying to match, who is distracted by the winger on the right flank. This opens up a lot of space between the Juventus fullback and the Juventus center back. The space is exploited by the Bologna runner, and Tomiyasu spots this and makes the pass. All in all, it's a very encouraging signing and a defender that I'm happy that Spurs are looking at. Does he fix all of Tottenham's issues? Absolutely not. Tottenham still need to find that one key stalwart defender to kind of shore up that back line. But Tomiyasu is a good acquisition, not just for the season, but for the future as well. That being said, he's not a perfect player by any means. As spoken about earlier in the video, he can be very aggressive in the tackle, and unfortunately for a player of this age, typically comes with the territory that if you're very aggressive in tackles and you're good at winning the ball, you're just going to commit a lot of fouls. That's just how it goes. Right now, he's averaging 1.08 fouls per 90. That's more than any Tottenham defender, yes, including Serge Aurier. So if fouls frustrated you on the right-hand side by Serge, you might have to kind of suck it up if Tomiyasu comes in. He also, for all of his strength in reading the game, sometimes he does slip up. He does have his mishaps. For example, against Fiorentina, here he steps up because he is following the run of someone who is dropping deep. He doesn't realize, however, that the Bologna teammate in the red circle is covering that man. Franck Ribery, of course, one of the best wingers in the world, was once one of the best wingers in the world. He's going to exploit that space any single day of the week. So he runs into the space that Tomiyasu has left behind, and Tomiyasu immediately knows that he has made a mistake, because in watching this live, you see his body shake. You see his body kind of do a 1-2, right? Like he's not sure whether to go with the man that's dropping deep or whether to cover the space. He elects to go with the man that's going deep, opens up the space, and Fiorentina are able to attack down the left-hand side. And one last thing that I think he can improve on moving forward is his aerial duels. And this one took a little bit to understand, because I went on WhoScored.com and they say that one of his main strengths is his aerial duels. But after looking at his numbers, I'm not sure why that would be classified as one of his main strengths. He wins about 55% of his aerial duels, which is frankly a little low for a center back slash right back. For example, Milenkovic at Fiorentina wins 68% of his headers for Fiorentina. Toby Alderweireld wins 67%. Davinson Sanchez wins 61%. Eric Dyer actually wins 66%. So those are, I think, more reliable numbers, whereas Tomiyasu's 55% is a bit shaky. That's why I don't think he would be that great in the center of the defense, at least when out of possession. In possession, he can absolutely play that right or left-sided center back role, depending on the opposition. But in defense, I think he's much more suited to just being a right back. One thing that I just mentioned, left-footed or left-sided center back, right? That's another very interesting thing that I saw about him. He can play on the left as well. In fact, he has 2 starts as a left-sided center back. But what's more interesting is that the Bologna manager has also switched his flanks in the middle of a game. Against Juventus, the last game of the season, he started out on the right-hand side. He ended the game on the left-hand side, which, also looking at his passing, tells me 2 things. Number 1, that he is very comfortable playing on both sides, but also number 2, he's very comfortable with his 2 feet. He has good ability with 2-footedness. Now, the reason that that's important is something that I went into on in my Joakim Andersen video, which you should absolutely check out. But it essentially gives a lot of tactical flexibility if the manager is willing to utilize that. He has made around 900 passes with his right foot and about 450 passes with his left foot. And if you look at some of the passes that he's making with that left foot, that tells you that he is actually very comfortable making those long passes on the left, just as he is on the right as well. It's interesting that Spurs are looking at center backs that have that 2-footedness. Joakim Andersen was one as well. And I would argue that Tomiyasu is even more so a 2-footed defender. I think that, again, Tomiyasu would be a good acquisition for Spurs, but the summer's not over, transfer window's not over. That's just one of many transfers that need to occur. So hit the subscribe button, hit the alert button. I will be making another video about Nuno Espirito Santo specifically and seeing how he might set up Spurs. And in the meantime, let me know what you think of Tomiyasu as a potential target for Spurs down below. Cheers, guys. Catch you next week.